bear cub was falling from a skyscraper. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning sun glinted off the glass towers of Cedar Heights as Olivia Mason lifted her 10-month-old daughter, Lily, from her crib. The baby's laughter echoed through the penthouse apartment on the 42nd floor, a sound that always made Olivia smile, no matter how exhausting motherhood could be. Today was special. They were hosting a small gathering for Olivia's husband's colleagues, and everything needed to be perfect. "You're going to be on your best behavior today, aren't you, sweetie?" Olivia cooed, brushing Lily's wispy blonde curls away from her forehead. The baby responded with a happy gurgle, her bright blue eyes twinkling with mischief. Outside their floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawled in every direction, a concrete jungle that seemed to stretch forever. What most residents of Cedar Heights didn't know was that the northern edge of the city had begun to blur into wilderness over recent years. Construction projects had stalled during the economic downturn, leaving patches of undeveloped land where nature had slowly reclaimed its territory. It was in one such forgotten corner that a mother bear had made her temporary home. Displaced by logging operations miles away, she had wandered closer to the city than any of her kind had ventured before, drawn by the easy meals from dumpsters and the relative safety from hunters. Her cub, barely 6 months old, followed her everywhere, learning the ways of survival in this strange new world where metal trees reached the clouds and noisy creatures moved in shiny boxes along gray rivers. That morning, while foraging for food, the mother bear had discovered a particularly rich source behind a restaurant. Distracted by the feast, she hadn't noticed her curious cub wandering away, following a butterfly that danced just out of reach. The little bear found himself inside a service entrance and into a freight elevator where a maintenance worker had propped the doors open while unloading supplies. Startled by the sudden appearance of humans, the cub had bolted out at the next stop, the unfinished 43rd floor of the same skyscraper where Olivia and Lily lived. Back in the penthouse, Olivia placed Lily on her playmat near the windows, surrounded by colorful toys. "Mommy's going to finish preparing for the party, sweetie. You play here where I can see you." Lily babbled happily, reaching for a plush elephant, her favorite toy. But something else caught her attention. Movement outside the window, 1 floor up. The curious baby pushed herself onto her hands and knees, crawling closer to the glass wall that separated her from the open air and the magnificent view. Above them, the frightened bear cub explored the unfinished floor, finding his way out onto a narrow maintenance ledge that wrapped around the building. Disoriented and scared, he paced back and forth, looking for his mother, unaware of the deadly drop that awaited one misstep. The first guests were arriving downstairs. Olivia rushed to the kitchen to check on the appetizers, calling to her husband, Daniel, who was finishing a work call in the bedroom. "Can you watch Lily for a minute? People are starting to arrive." "Just 1 more minute," Daniel called back, his voice muffled by the closed door. Meanwhile, Lily pressed her tiny palms against the cool glass, fascinated by the small brown creature moving above. She had never seen a bear before, not even in picture books. The cub paused, as if sensing he was being watched, and peered down. For a brief, magical moment, the eyes of the baby and the bear cub met across the impossible divide, a connection between 2 young creatures full of curiosity and innocence. That's when it happened. A sudden gust of wind swept around the building, carrying with it a plastic bag that fluttered past the cub like a strange bird. Startled, the cub jumped back, his small paws slipping on the smooth concrete. Lily watched with wide eyes as the cub teetered on the edge, tiny claws scraping desperately against the surface. Time seemed to slow as the cub lost his balance and tumbled from the ledge, falling through the air just outside Lily's window. A high-pitched sound escaped Lily's mouth. Not her usual baby babble, but something more urgent, more primal. Her tiny fists began banging against the glass, her eyes never leaving the falling cub. The sound grew louder, cutting through the ambient noise of the apartment, through the soft music Olivia had put on, through the conversation Daniel was having on the phone. Down below, pedestrians stopped in their tracks, pointing upward with expressions of horror on their faces. A woman screamed. A man dialed emergency services with shaking fingers, but they were too far away to do anything but watch the tragedy unfold. What nobody noticed was Marco Delgado, a window washer who had been working his way down the building's gleaming exterior. 20 floors below the penthouse, Marco was lost in thought, wondering if he would make it home in time for his daughter's school play that evening, when he heard a strange sound. A baby's cry, amplified by the building's acoustics. Looking up, he caught sight of something falling, something brown and small and alive, plummeting directly toward him. Marco's heart leaped into his throat. In the 4 years he had been washing windows on the city's tallest buildings, he had seen birds hit the glass, construction materials fall, and once even a drone crash into a penthouse balcony. But never had he seen something like this, a living creature falling to what would surely be its death. Without thinking, Marco yanked the control lever of his suspended platform, sending it swinging wildly toward the building. The sudden movement nearly threw him off balance, but years of working at these heights had given him exceptional reflexes. He steadied himself with one hand, while the other reached for the large canvas tarp he used to cover his equipment during rain showers. "Dios mío, help me catch it," he whispered, his voice lost in the wind that whipped around the skyscraper. The tarp unfurled with a snap as Marco held it out with both hands, creating a makeshift net. The platform continued to swing, its momentum carrying it directly into the path of the falling cub. Marco braced himself, knowing the impact could knock him off the platform if he wasn't careful. Inside the penthouse, Lily's cries had turned into a full-blown wail. The sound finally penetrated Daniel's concentration, and he emerged from the bedroom, phone still in hand. "Olivia, what's wrong with Lily?" he called. But his wife was in the kitchen, greeting the first guests who had just arrived via the private elevator. Daniel rushed to his daughter, who was pressed against the window, tears streaming down her face as she pointed frantically at something outside. Looking up, Daniel caught a glimpse of something falling, and then his eyes widened as he spotted Marco's platform swinging into view. "Oh my God," he breathed, picking up Lily and stepping back from the window. The mother bear, meanwhile, had finally noticed her cub's absence. With a low, worried growl, she abandoned the feast behind the restaurant and began following her cub's scent. The trail led her toward the base of the skyscraper, where a crowd was beginning to gather, pointing upward. The mother bear's instincts told her to flee from so many humans, but her maternal drive was stronger. She lingered at the edge of the gathering, hidden between parked cars, her eyes scanning upward. High above, the cub tumbled through the air, a small brown blur against the building's reflective surface. Each second of falling brought it closer to the hard concrete below, but also closer to Marco's outstretched tarp. Time seemed to stretch as the cub fell the last few feet toward the platform. With a soft thud that belied the drama of the moment, the bear cub landed in the center of Marco's tarp. The impact was stronger than Marco had anticipated, and the platform swayed dangerously. The cub, terrified and disoriented, began thrashing immediately, its claws tearing at the canvas. "Tranquilo, pequeño, tranquilo," Marco soothed, trying to secure the edges of the tarp while keeping his balance on the rocking platform. The cub's frightened squeals were heart-wrenching. But Marco had another problem. The platform's safety cable had snagged during the sudden swing, and now a warning light was flashing on the control panel. The jolt from catching the cub had damaged something in the mechanism. The platform wasn't stable. On the street below, the crowd had grown. Smartphones were pointed upward, recording the unfolding drama. Emergency services had been called, but they hadn't arrived yet. Among the onlookers, the mother bear inched closer, her protective instincts overwhelming her fear of humans. Back in the penthouse, Olivia returned to find Daniel holding a crying Lily by the window. "What's happening?" she asked, alarmed by both her daughter's distress and the strange expression on her husband's face. "You won't believe it," Daniel said, pointing outside. "There's a bear cub that fell from somewhere above us, and the window washer caught it in some kind of tarp. But I think he's in trouble now." Olivia gasped, joining them at the window. She could see Marco struggling to control both the platform and the panicking cub. "We need to help him somehow," she said, pulling out her phone to call building security. As she dialed, a new commotion erupted on the street below. People were backing away from something, screams mixing with shouts of warning. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Daniel and Olivia could see the cause. A full-grown black bear had emerged from between parked cars and was now standing on the sidewalk, looking up at the building. "Is that?" Olivia couldn't finish the question. "The mother," Daniel confirmed, his voice tight with tension. This just got a lot more complicated. Marco, unaware of the new development below, was dealing with his own crisis. The platform had begun to tilt to one side, the damaged cable creating a dangerous imbalance. The control panel was now flashing red, and an alarm had begun to sound. He needed to get to safety quickly, but he couldn't abandon the cub, who had curled into a frightened ball in the center of the tarp. Lily, still in Daniel's arms, had stopped crying. She stared intently at Marco and the cub, as if understanding the gravity of the situation. Then, to her parents' surprise, she pointed directly at their balcony, just a few feet away from where Marco's platform hung precariously. "Bah," she said clearly, her first recognizable word. "Bah." Daniel and Olivia exchanged a look of shock. Then, understanding dawned on Daniel's face. "She wants us to help them," he said, "and she's right. We can reach them from the balcony." Without waiting for Olivia's response, Daniel handed Lily to her and rushed to the balcony door. The gathering of colleagues and friends watched in confusion as he slid the door open and stepped out into the brisk air, 42 stories above the ground. "Hey," Daniel called to Marco, "can you swing closer?" "I can help you get in." Marco looked up, relief flooding his face when he saw Daniel. "The cable's damaged," he shouted back, his voice barely audible over the wind. "I don't know how long it will hold." As if to emphasize his point, the platform gave a sickening lurch, dropping several inches before catching itself. Marco grabbed the railing with one hand, the other still clutching the tarp with the trembling cub inside. On the street below, the mother bear had begun to pace anxiously, ignoring the humans who continued to back away in fear. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Inside the penthouse, the guests had gathered by the windows, watching the drama unfold with a mixture of horror and fascination. Olivia stood frozen, holding Lily tightly against her chest, her heart pounding as she watched her husband lean dangerously far over the balcony railing. "Daniel, be careful," she called, but her voice was muffled by the closed balcony door. Lily squirmed in her mother's arms, still pointing insistently at the bear cub. "Bah!" she repeated, more urgently this time. "Bah!" The platform lurched again, and this time one of the cables made a terrifying snapping sound. Marco's face went pale as he felt the platform begin to give way beneath him. "Jump now!" Daniel shouted, extending his arms as far as he could while keeping his feet anchored inside the balcony. The gap between them was still about 4 feet, a distance that seemed impossibly vast given the deadly drop below. Marco looked at the terrified cub, then at Daniel, and made a split-second decision. He gathered the edges of the tarp in one hand, creating a makeshift sling for the cub. With the other hand, he gripped the platform railing, preparing to leap. "Throw me the cub first," Daniel called, realizing that Marco couldn't jump while holding the animal. Marco hesitated for just a moment, then nodded. He swung the tarp-wrapped cub gently back and forth, gaining momentum. 1, 2, 3. On the final count, he released the bundle toward Daniel's outstretched arms. The tarp unfurled slightly in midair, revealing a glimpse of brown fur and frightened eyes. Time seemed to slow as the bundle arced through the open air. Daniel lunged forward, his body now dangerously far over the railing, and caught the edge of the tarp. The weight nearly pulled him over, but he managed to brace himself against the railing with his legs, muscles straining as he hauled the squirming bundle to safety. Inside the penthouse, several guests gasped. Olivia instinctively turned Lily away from the window, fearing what might happen next. But the baby twisted in her arms, determined to see, her eyes wide and focused on the bear cub. Daniel placed the tarp bundle safely on the balcony floor, where the cub immediately retreated to a corner, trembling visibly beneath the canvas. "Now you," Daniel shouted to Marco, whose platform was now tilted at a sickening angle. The second cable was starting to fray, the individual strands snapping one by one. Marco knew he had seconds, not minutes. He climbed over the platform railing, balancing on the edge as the wind buffeted him. The gap between him and the balcony seemed to grow wider by the second, as the platform continued to drift slightly away from the building. Inside, one of the guests, Dr. Elena Reyes, a veterinarian who worked with wildlife, had pushed her way forward. "Let me help," she said to Olivia, holding out her arms for Lily. Olivia handed over her daughter, then rushed to the balcony door. She slid it open just as Marco tensed to jump. "Wait!" she cried. "Let me help too." She grabbed a tablecloth from a nearby serving table and rushed out onto the balcony. Standing beside Daniel, she held one end of the tablecloth while he took the other, creating a makeshift extension to their reach. "Now!" Daniel shouted. Marco leaped into the air just as the platform cable gave way completely. His body hurtled across the gap, hands outstretched toward the tablecloth. His fingers grasped the fabric, but the force of his jump pulled it from Olivia's grip. For a heart-stopping moment, Marco hung by one hand from the tablecloth that Daniel still held. "Hold on," Daniel grunted, his muscles straining as he began to pull Marco toward the balcony, inch by excruciating inch. Olivia grabbed Daniel around the waist, anchoring him, adding her strength to his. Together, they pulled until Marco could grasp the balcony railing with his free hand. With a final heave, they hauled him over the edge and onto the solid safety of the balcony floor. All three collapsed, gasping for breath. Behind them, the platform plummeted down the side of the building, crashing onto an empty section of the street below with a distant metallic crunch. "The cub," Marco gasped, once he could speak. "Is it okay?" They turned to the corner where the tarp bundle lay. Slowly, a small head emerged from the folds of canvas. The bear cub blinked at them with dark, frightened eyes, its whole body shaking. Inside the penthouse, Lily had been watching everything unfold from Dr. Reyes's arms. The moment she saw the cub emerge from the tarp, she began to squirm excitedly. "Bah!" she called again, reaching toward the balcony. Dr. Reyes approached the balcony door cautiously. I'm a wildlife vet, she explained to Daniel and Olivia, who were still catching their breath. May I? They nodded, and Dr. Reyes stepped onto the balcony, still holding Lily. She knelt several feet away from the cub, keeping a respectful distance. It's a black bear cub, probably around 6 months old, she said softly. He's terrified, but I don't see any obvious injuries from the fall. It's a miracle. The cub watched them warily but didn't retreat further into the corner. Its tiny chest heaved with rapid breaths. What do we do with it now? Olivia asked, glancing nervously at the city spread out below them. How did it even get up here? Before Dr. Reyes could answer, Lily let out another excited "Bah!" and pointed not at the cub, but down toward the street. They followed her gesture and saw what the gathering crowd below had already noticed. The mother bear was now in full view, pacing anxiously on the sidewalk. Police officers had established a perimeter, keeping onlookers at a safe distance. The mother bear seemed oblivious to the humans, her attention fixed on the building where her cub had disappeared. That complicates things, Dr. Reyes said, her voice tight with concern. We've got a cub up here and a mother down there, and about 40 floors between them. As if sensing they were talking about her, the mother bear rose onto her hind legs, sniffing the air. She dropped back to all fours and let out a low, mournful sound that somehow carried all the way up to them, a sound so full of maternal anguish that it made Olivia's eyes fill with tears. The cub's ears perked up at the sound. It moved cautiously to the edge of the balcony, pressing its small nose between the railings, trying to catch its mother's scent. We need to get them reunited, Marco said firmly. After what just happened, it feels like fate, you know? That I was there at that exact moment, that the little one survived. Daniel nodded slowly. But how? We can't exactly send it down in the elevator. Dr. Reyes was already pulling out her phone. I know someone with the wildlife department. They have protocols for situations like this, though usually it's a cat up a tree, not a bear cub on a penthouse balcony. As Dr. Reyes made her call, stepping back inside for better reception, Olivia noticed something strange. Lily, still watching the cub intently, had begun to make a soft humming sound. It wasn't her usual babbling or crying. It was almost melodic. The cub, which had been trembling non-stop since its rescue, began to calm visibly, its breathing slowing as it listened to the baby's gentle humming. Look, Olivia whispered to Daniel, nodding toward the unlikely pair. Lily and the bear cub were staring at each other, separated by several feet of balcony space but connected by something indefinable, a kind of innocent curiosity that transcended species. Neither showed fear of the other. Marco, who had moved to the balcony railing to look down at the mother bear, suddenly tensed. We have another problem, he said urgently. Daniel and Olivia joined him at the railing. Below, the mother bear had begun to pace more frantically. Several police officers were aiming what looked like tranquilizer guns in her direction. They're going to dart her, Daniel realized aloud. They think she's a threat. But she's just trying to find her baby, Olivia protested. Marco was already waving his arms, trying to get the attention of the officers below, but they were too far away to notice him. Inside, Dr. Reyes finished her call and returned to the balcony. Help is on the way, she announced, but it will take about 20 minutes for the wildlife team to get here. The mother might not have 20 minutes, Daniel said grimly, pointing down. Dr. Reyes assessed the situation quickly. We need to let them know the cub is safe. If they tranquilize the mother now, the cub will have to go to a wildlife rehabilitation center. They might never be reunited. The thought sent a pang through Olivia's heart. She looked at Lily, still humming softly to the calming cub, and then at her own husband, who had just risked his life to save Marco and the baby bear. This strange, unlikely chain of events had brought them all together, and she suddenly felt fiercely determined to see it through to a happy ending. "I have an idea," she said, pulling out her own phone, "but I need everyone's help." Olivia quickly explained her plan. She would call the building's security office, which had a direct line to the police coordinator on scene. Meanwhile, Daniel would use an old bedsheet to create a makeshift sign they could hang from the balcony, letting everyone below know that the cub was safe. "Marco, can you take some photos of the cub with my phone? We can send them to security to show the police," Olivia said, handing him her device. As everyone sprang into action, Dr. Reyes gently approached the bear cub with a small container of water she'd retrieved from inside. "He's probably dehydrated from stress," she explained, setting it down near the cub before backing away. The cub sniffed cautiously at the water but didn't drink. Instead, it kept glancing between Lily, who was still making her soothing humming sound, and the balcony edge, beyond which its mother paced anxiously. Inside the penthouse, the gathering had transformed from a casual social event to an impromptu rescue mission. Guests were fetching supplies, moving furniture to create a path to the balcony, and keeping their voices low to avoid frightening the cub. One guest, a local news reporter named Sophia Chen, was making calls to contacts at her station, ensuring that the police and wildlife officials on scene would get accurate information. Daniel returned with a white bedsheet and a thick black marker. "What should it say?" he asked, spreading the sheet on the floor. "Bear cub safe, don't shoot mother," Olivia suggested. As Daniel wrote the message in large letters, Olivia connected with building security. "Yes, this is Olivia Mason in Penthouse B. We have a situation. No, everyone is safe, but there's a bear cub on our balcony and its mother is on the street below. The police are about to tranquilize her, but we need them to wait. Wildlife rescue is already on the way." There was a pause as she listened to the response. "Yes, we have photos. I'll send them right now. Please tell the police that the wildlife team will be here in less than 20 minutes. Marco had managed to take several clear photos of the cub, which was now watching Lily with apparent fascination. Olivia forwarded these to the security office, along with Dr. Reyes's credentials and contact information. "They're calling the police commander now," Olivia reported after ending the call. "But we should still hang the sign as backup." Daniel had finished writing the message. With Marco's help, he secured the sheet to the balcony railing so it hung down the side of the building, clearly visible from below. Almost immediately, they could see a change in the activity on the street. The officers lowered their tranquilizer guns and seemed to be conferring with someone on a radio. The crowd, which had grown considerably, buzzed with excitement. "I think it's working," Marco said with relief. The mother bear, however, seemed increasingly agitated. She continued to pace, occasionally rising onto her hind legs as if trying to climb the sheer face of the skyscraper to reach her cub. "She knows he's up here," Dr. Reyes said. "Bears have an incredible sense of smell." The cub, seemingly emboldened by the relative calm on the balcony, had moved a little closer to Lily, who was now sitting on the floor with Dr. Reyes's protective arm around her. Olivia watched nervously, but Dr. Reyes gave her a reassuring nod. "He's just curious," the vet whispered, "and your daughter has somehow managed to make him feel safe. I've never seen anything like it." Lily had stopped humming and was now watching the cub with a solemn expression that seemed far too mature for her young face. Slowly, deliberately, she picked up her plush elephant toy that Olivia had brought outside and placed it on the floor between herself and the cub. It was an offering, a bridge across the species divide. The cub sniffed the air, then cautiously approached the toy. It sniffed the plush elephant thoroughly, then gently batted at it with one paw, as if testing whether it was alive. Everyone on the balcony held their breath. Lily giggled softly at the cub's antics, and to everyone's amazement, the cub looked up at the sound, its head tilted in what looked remarkably like curiosity. "They're communicating," Dr. Reyes whispered, her professional detachment momentarily forgotten in the wonder of the moment. A new sound drew their attention back to the street below. A large van with Wildlife Rescue emblazoned on its side had arrived, and several people in uniform were emerging, carrying equipment. The police were keeping the crowd at a safe distance while the wildlife team assessed the situation. One of the wildlife officers raised a bullhorn, and a crackling voice reached them faintly. "Attention residents with the bear cub, this is Wildlife Rescue. Please stay where you are. We are preparing to safely retrieve the cub and reunite it with the mother. Do not attempt to handle the animal." "Thank goodness," Olivia breathed. "Now, we just need to keep the cub calm until they get here." But, as if on cue, a sudden commotion erupted on the street. The mother bear, perhaps sensing that something was about to happen to her cub, had charged toward the entrance of the building. People scattered, screaming. The police officers raised their tranquilizer guns again. The cub, alarmed by the noise, retreated back to the corner of the balcony, trembling once more. Lily made a distressed sound, reaching toward the frightened animal. "This is getting dangerous," Daniel said tensely. "If they tranquilize the mother now, she could be injured in the fall." Dr. Reyes was already dialing her wildlife contact again. "We need to speed things up," she said urgently when they answered. "The situation is escalating. The mother is trying to enter the building." As Dr. Reyes spoke rapidly into her phone, Olivia had a sudden flash of insight. She knelt beside Lily, who was still watching the cub with concern. "Sweetie, can you make that humming sound again? The one that made the cub feel better?" Lily looked at her mother, then back at the frightened cub. After a moment's hesitation, she began to hum again, the same soothing melody as before. Olivia joined in, then Daniel, and finally Marco and Dr. Reyes, creating a gentle harmony that seemed to float on the breeze. The effect on the cub was immediate. It stopped trembling and turned toward the sound, its small ears perked forward. Below, something equally remarkable happened. The mother bear stopped her charge toward the building and stood still, her head tilted upward as if listening. "It's working," Marco whispered between hums. "Look at the mother." The humming continued, a strange lullaby sung by 5 humans to 2 bears 42 stories apart. The wildlife team below had noticed the effect and were taking advantage of the momentary calm to prepare what looked like a large transport cage. Dr. Reyes lowered her phone. "They're sending a team up through the building," she reported quietly. "They'll come through the penthouse to the balcony, and they have a plan for safely lowering the cub to reunite it with the mother in a controlled environment away from the crowd." Minutes ticked by as they maintained their unusual chorus. The cub had actually settled down, sitting on its haunches near Lily's discarded toy. The mother bear remained at attention below, no longer charging but clearly unwilling to leave the vicinity of her cub. The penthouse elevator chimed, announcing new arrivals. 2 wildlife officers in green uniforms entered, carrying specialized equipment and a small transport cage lined with soft blankets. "Dr. Reyes," one of them greeted with a nod. "Thanks for your help. I'm Officer Jenkins, and this is Officer Patel." Officer Patel approached the balcony door slowly, assessing the situation. "Remarkable," she said softly. "You've managed to keep it calm this whole time." "It was the baby," Marco said, nodding toward Lily. She started humming to it, and somehow it worked. Officer Jenkins smiled. Animals often respond to children differently than adults. Less threatening, perhaps. He turned to address everyone. Here's the plan. We'll carefully secure the cub in our transport carrier. Then we'll take it down to a secure location where we can safely reunite it with the mother before relocating them both to a more suitable habitat away from the city. How will you get the mother to cooperate? Daniel asked skeptically. Once she senses her cub is nearby, she'll follow, Officer Patel explained. Bears are incredibly devoted mothers. Our main concern is keeping everyone safe during the process, the bears and the people. The officers prepared their equipment: thick protective gloves, a special capture pole with a gentle loop mechanism, and the small transport cage. Officer Jenkins approached the balcony, moving with deliberate slowness. "Keep humming," he suggested softly. "It seems to be working." Olivia, Daniel, Marco, and Dr. Reyes continued their gentle chorus, while Officer Patel joined them, expertly wielding the capture pole. The cub watched warily but didn't flee as the loop was carefully positioned around its body and gently tightened. Just enough to guide, not enough to hurt. "Easy does it," Officer Patel murmured as she guided the cub toward the waiting cage. With practiced efficiency, she transferred the cub into the carrier and secured the door. The cub made a small whimpering sound but didn't panic. Lily, who had stopped humming to watch the process, suddenly pointed at her plush elephant toy still lying on the balcony floor. "Bah!" she insisted. Everyone looked at her in confusion until Olivia understood. "I think she wants you to put her toy in with the cub," she told Officer Patel. "For comfort." Officer Patel hesitated, then nodded. She carefully picked up the plush elephant and, after a quick inspection to ensure it was safe, placed it in the carrier with the cub. To everyone's surprise, the cub immediately curled up next to the toy, seeming to draw comfort from the familiar object that carried Lily's scent. "Your daughter might have a future in wildlife rehabilitation," Officer Jenkins told Olivia with a smile. That was good thinking. As the officers prepared to transport the caged cub back through the penthouse to the elevator, Lily began to cry softly. "It's okay, sweetie," Olivia soothed, lifting her daughter into her arms. "They're going to take the cub back to its mommy. That's good, right?" Lily continued to whimper, reaching toward the cage as Officer Patel carried it past them. "I think she's attached to both the cub and her toy," Daniel said, a hint of amusement mixing with the tension of the moment. "Tell you what," Officer Jenkins said kindly, addressing Lily directly. "Once we've safely reunited the cub with its mother and moved them to a better home in the forest, we'll send you a special new toy bear to replace your elephant. Would you like that?" Lily didn't respond directly, but her crying subsided slightly. Olivia mouthed a thank you to the officer. "Wait," Marco said suddenly as the officers reached the penthouse door. Can we see the reunion? After everything that's happened, it feels wrong not to see it through to the end." Officer Jenkins considered this for a moment. "It's not standard procedure to have civilians present during wildlife operations, but—" He glanced at his partner, who gave a slight nod. "Given the exceptional circumstances, maybe we can arrange something. Not up close, of course, but perhaps from a safe viewing point." 20 minutes later, Olivia, Daniel, and Lily, along with Marco and Dr. Reyes, found themselves in a cordoned-off area of the building's underground parking garage. The wildlife team had determined this was the safest location for the reunion. Enclosed enough to prevent the bears from escaping into the city streets, but with a clear exit route to a nearby wooded area. The mother bear had been carefully lured into the garage with a trail of food, though she needed little encouragement once she caught her cub's scent. Now she paced anxiously inside a temporary enclosure of portable barriers, while the humans watched from behind a secure gate. "Remember, absolute silence," Officer Jenkins reminded them. Any sudden noise could stress the animals and make the reunion more dangerous. Olivia held Lily securely in her arms, the baby unusually solemn, as if understanding the gravity of the moment. Daniel kept his arm protectively around his wife and daughter, while Marco and Dr. Reyes stood slightly apart, professional observers to the unfolding drama. Officer Patel appeared, wheeling the cub's carrier on a small cart. She positioned it at the entrance to the enclosure, then carefully retreated to a safe distance. Using a long pole, she unlatched the carrier door from afar, then slowly pulled it open. For a long moment, nothing happened. The cub remained inside the carrier, perhaps too frightened to emerge. The mother bear sensed the change, however, and grew still, her nose twitching as she caught her baby's scent more strongly. Olivia felt Lily tense in her arms. The baby was staring intently at the carrier, as if willing the cub to come out. Then, to everyone's amazement, Lily began to hum again. The same soothing melody from before, but softer now, barely audible. Before Officer Jenkins could shush her, they all saw the effect. The cub's small head appeared at the carrier door, sniffing cautiously. It took one tentative step out, Lily's plush elephant still clutched in its mouth like a security blanket. The mother bear made a soft chuffing sound, a gentle call that seemed to transcend the barriers of species and touch something universal. Olivia felt tears spring to her eyes as she recognized the sound of a mother calling her child. The cub froze for a moment, then dropped the toy and scampered across the concrete floor toward its mother. The reunion was swift and tender, the mother bear engulfing her cub in what could only be described as an embrace, sniffing every inch of it as if checking for injuries while the cub nuzzled against her fur. "Perfect," Officer Patel whispered, her professional demeanor momentarily softened by the scene. "Absolutely perfect." The wildlife team waited until the bears were fully distracted by their reunion, before quietly opening a large rolling door at the far end of the garage, revealing a path that led toward a wooded area at the edge of the property. They created a corridor with more portable barriers, effectively creating a protected route from the garage to freedom. Slowly, cautiously, the mother bear led her cub toward the opening, pausing occasionally to sniff the air, but never straying from the path. The humans watched in reverent silence as the bears reached the edge of the garage, hesitated briefly in the daylight, then disappeared into the protective cover of the trees. Only when the bears were completely out of sight did the tension break. Officer Jenkins let out a long breath and smiled at the group. "Well, that couldn't have gone better," he said, visibly relieved. "In 20 years of wildlife rescue, I've never seen anything quite like this." Lily was still watching the spot where the bears had disappeared, a strange expression on her baby face. Olivia bounced her gently, trying to distract her. "Look, sweetie, the bear is going home with his mommy. Isn't that nice?" But Lily continued to stare, and then, to everyone's surprise, she began to cry. Not her usual fussy whimpers, but deep, heartbroken sobs that shook her tiny body. "Oh, honey," Olivia soothed, bewildered by the intensity of her daughter's reaction. "It's okay." Dr. Reyes approached them, her expression thoughtful. "She's grieving," she said softly. "She connected with that cub in a way that defies explanation, and now she's feeling the separation." Daniel looked skeptical. "She's 10 months old. Can babies really process emotions that complex?" "Children, even very young ones, can form powerful bonds with animals," Dr. Reyes explained. "And those bonds don't always follow our adult understanding of relationships. What happened up there on the balcony was unusual, to say the least." Lily continued to cry inconsolably as they made their way back up to the penthouse. The party guests had been politely escorted out by building security during the rescue operation, leaving the apartment eerily quiet. Olivia tried everything. Lily's favorite toys, a bottle, even the cupcake she'd been saving for a special treat. But nothing could console her daughter. Maybe she's just overtired from all the excitement, Daniel suggested, taking a turn at holding the crying baby while Olivia sank exhausted onto the couch. Marco, who had returned with them to retrieve his equipment that had been brought up by the building staff, paused at the door. "I should be going," he said awkwardly, clearly reluctant to leave in the middle of what seemed like a family crisis. "Thank you," Olivia told him sincerely, "for everything, if you hadn't been there." Marco nodded, understanding everything she wasn't saying. "It was fate," he said simply. "I was meant to be there." He glanced at Lily, who was still crying in Daniel's arms. Maybe the little one needs closure. You know, like adults sometimes do when they lose something important. The idea seemed ridiculous on the surface. What kind of closure could a 10-month-old possibly need? But as Marco left and Lily's crying continued, Olivia began to wonder if there might be something to his suggestion. "What if we take her to see where the bears went?" she proposed to Daniel after another half-hour of inconsolable tears. "Just to the edge of those woods. Not close enough to be dangerous, of course, but maybe if she sees where they've gone." Daniel looked dubious, but was clearly willing to try anything. "I guess it couldn't hurt. We could drive down to that area of the property." Dr. Reyes, who had stayed to help clean up the aftermath of the interrupted party, overheard them. "I'd advise against that," she said seriously. "Those bears have just been through a traumatic experience. The mother will be extremely protective right now. You should give them at least 24 hours before going anywhere near that area." Olivia's shoulders slumped in defeat. "Then what do we do? I can't bear to see her like this." Dr. Reyes considered for a moment. "I have an idea," she said finally. "It's a bit unconventional, but it might help." She pulled out her phone and made a quick call, speaking too quietly for Olivia to hear the details. After she hung up, she turned to the exhausted parents. "I have a colleague who works with a wildlife rehabilitation center about an hour from here. They have a 3-month-old black bear cub that was orphaned last week. It's being hand-raised until it can be placed with a surrogate mother bear." Daniel frowned, not following. "And that helps us how?" "They use special stuffed bears that simulate the feel, smell, and even heartbeat of a mother bear to comfort orphaned cubs," Dr. Reyes explained. "My colleague is bringing one to us. It's worth a try. It might give Lily the sense of connection she's missing." It seemed far-fetched, but at this point Olivia was willing to try anything. "How soon can they get here?" "About an hour. In the meantime, maybe try putting on some of the same humming sounds you were making on the balcony. That seemed to calm both Lily and the cub earlier." Daniel began to hum the improvised melody they had created earlier, and Olivia joined in. To their amazement, Lily's sobs began to quiet almost immediately. Her crying didn't stop entirely, but it softened to sniffles and hiccups as she listened to the familiar tune. For the next hour, they took turns humming, afraid to stop lest Lily's full-blown crying resume. Finally, the penthouse elevator chimed, announcing Dr. Reyes's colleague's arrival. Dr. Samantha Wong entered carrying a large, soft object wrapped in a green cloth. "Sorry it took so long," she apologized. "Traffic was terrible." She set her bundle down on the coffee table and carefully unwrapped it, revealing what looked like an oversized teddy bear with unusually realistic features. The bear was covered in soft, dark fur that closely resembled that of the cub they had rescued. But it was the eyes that were most startling. Warm and expressive, seeming to hold a depth of emotion that no ordinary stuffed toy could capture. This is one of our comfort bears, Dr. Wong explained, lifting the toy. We've found that orphaned cubs respond better to their formula feeding and general care when they have something like this to cling to. It has a battery-operated heartbeat mechanism inside and is scented with natural bear pheromones that help calm the cubs. Lily, who had been watching the unwrapping process with tearful curiosity, suddenly reached out toward the bear, making an urgent sound. Dr. Wong smiled and gently handed the comfort bear to Olivia. "Let her approach it in her own time," she advised. "It might seem strange to her at first." Olivia sat on the floor with the bear propped beside her, continuing to hum softly. Daniel set Lily down a few feet away. For a moment, the baby just stared at the bear, her eyes wide and still glistening with tears. Then, slowly, she began to crawl toward it. When she reached the comfort bear, Lily placed one small hand on its fur, feeling the texture. Then, to everyone's astonishment, she leaned forward and pressed her ear against the bear's chest, listening to the artificial heartbeat within. A look of profound relief washed over her face, and she wrapped her arms around the bear as best she could, given its size. "Remarkable," Dr. Wong murmured. "I've never seen a human child respond to the comfort bear the way our orphaned cubs do. This connection your daughter formed with that cub must have been extraordinarily powerful." Olivia felt tears spring to her own eyes as she watched Lily's distress melt away. The baby was now patting the bear's fur with both hands, making soft cooing sounds as if trying to comfort it in return. "She can keep it, Doctor," Wong said softly. "We have others, and I've never seen such a clear therapeutic benefit for a human child. Just remove the heartbeat mechanism when she's sleeping for safety." Olivia tried to protest. Surely these specialized therapeutic bears were expensive. But Dr. Wong waved her concerns away. "Consider it a gift from the Wildlife Center. After all, your family helped save that cub today. We're just returning the favor." As Dr. Wong and Dr. Reyes prepared to leave, promising to check in the next day, Olivia and Daniel exchanged a look of cautious relief. Lily had finally stopped crying completely and was now babbling happily to her new comfort bear, seeming to have already formed a deep attachment to it. "Thank you both," Daniel said sincerely, as he showed the doctors to the door. "I don't know what we would have done otherwise." After they left, the small family gathered in the living room, emotionally and physically exhausted by the day's events. Lily refused to be separated from her new bear companion, so they set up a play area where she could sit with it while they ordered dinner, the planned party meal long since abandoned. "What a day," Daniel sighed, sinking onto the couch beside Olivia. "When I woke up this morning, I never could have imagined we'd end up rescuing a bear cub from certain death and then comforting our daughter through an interspecies friendship breakup." Olivia laughed weakly, leaning against his shoulder. "Life with a child is full of surprises, isn't it? Though I hope not all of them are quite this dramatic." They watched as Lily played contentedly with the comfort bear, occasionally pressing her ear to its chest, as if to reassure herself that the heartbeat was still there. "Do you think she'll remember any of this when she's older?" Daniel wondered. "Probably not consciously," Olivia replied. "But somewhere deep inside, I think a part of her will always remember the connection she made today, and who knows? Maybe it will shape her in ways we can't even imagine yet." As night fell and the city lights began to twinkle outside their windows, the family settled into a quiet evening that felt both ordinary and profoundly changed. The day's remarkable events had created an invisible thread, connecting them to the wild mother and cub now making their way through the darkness beyond the city, a reminder of the unexpected bonds that could form between the most unlikely of creatures. What none of them realized, however, was that this was only the beginning of a much stranger and more wonderful story, one that would unfold in the days and weeks to come, challenging everything they thought they knew about the barriers between humans and wildlife, between civilization and the wild. 3 days after the dramatic rescue, the comfort bear had become Lily's constant companion. She insisted on taking it everywhere, to meals, to bath time, much to Daniel's consternation as he tried to keep the specialized toy from getting soaked, and especially to bed, where the gentle mechanical heartbeat seemed to help her sleep more soundly than she had in months. Olivia and Daniel had settled back into their routine, though they now found themselves minor celebrities in the building. Neighbors who had witnessed the rescue from below stopped them in the elevator to ask questions, and the building management had sent a large gift basket in appreciation for their quick thinking and cooperation during the wildlife incident, as they diplomatically phrased it. Marco had called once to check on them, reporting that his window washing platform had been replaced, and that his supervisor had given him a week off with pay after hearing about his heroism. "My daughter says I'm better than any superhero," he told Olivia proudly. "For once, I actually feel like one." It was on the morning of the 4th day that the first truly strange occurrence happened. Olivia was in the kitchen preparing breakfast while Daniel showered. Lily sat in her high chair, the comfort bear propped in a nearby adult chair at her insistence. Olivia had just turned away to retrieve something from the refrigerator when she heard a sharp crack. Spinning around, she found Lily giggling and clapping her hands. The wooden tray of the high chair, which had previously been perfectly intact, now had a distinct crack running through its center. "How on earth?" Olivia murmured, approaching cautiously. Lily was a strong baby for her age, but there was no way she could have exerted enough pressure to split solid wood. As Olivia examined the damage, she noticed something even more disturbing. At the edges of the crack were what appeared to be small indentations, almost like claw marks, as if something had dug into the wood and pulled outward. A cold shiver ran down Olivia's spine. She glanced at Lily, who was now babbling happily to the comfort bear, as if sharing a secret joke. Then she looked more closely at her daughter's hands. They seemed perfectly normal. Tiny fingers with perfectly ordinary baby fingernails, recently trimmed. "Daniel," she called, her voice shakier than she intended. "Can you come in here for a second?" He appeared a moment later, hair still damp from the shower. "What's up?" Wordlessly, Olivia pointed to the cracked tray. Daniel frowned, running his finger along the damage. "That's weird," he said. "Was it like this before?" "No, it just happened. I heard it crack, but Lily couldn't have done this. Look at the marks along the edge. They almost look like—" "Claw marks," Daniel finished for her, his expression shifting from confusion to concern. He looked at Lily, who smiled innocently back at him. "That's not possible." "I know it's not," Olivia agreed quickly. "It must have been structurally weak already, and I'm just seeing things in the pattern of the wood grain." But even as she offered this rational explanation, she couldn't quite convince herself. The marks were too distinct, too deliberate. Daniel shrugged it off more easily. "I'll pick up a new high chair on my way home from work. This one was getting old anyway. The incident might have been forgotten if it had been the only strange occurrence, but it wasn't." That afternoon, while Lily napped with the comfort bear tucked against her side, Olivia noticed that the toy's glass eyes seemed to track her movements around the room. She told herself it was just a trick of the light, the reflective quality of the glass catching different angles as she moved. But when she stood perfectly still and the eyes still seemed to shift slightly, as if blinking, she couldn't suppress a gasp of alarm. The sound woke Lily, and the moment the baby stirred, the comfort bear's eyes returned to their fixed, inanimate stare. That night, after Lily was asleep, Olivia confided her concerns to Daniel. "I think there's something not right about that bear," she whispered, glancing toward the nursery where Lily slept with the comfort bear nestled beside her. Daniel put down his laptop, giving her his full attention. "What do you mean, not right?" "I know this sounds crazy, but I swear the eyes move when Lily's not looking. And that crack in the high chair, those were claw marks, Daniel. I'm sure of it." He took her hands in his expression gentle but concerned. "Olivia, you've been through a lot in the past few days. We all have. The stress of the rescue, seeing Lily so upset afterward, it would be enough to make anyone's imagination work overtime." "You think I'm imagining things," she said flatly. "I think you're an amazing, protective mother who just witnessed something pretty traumatic," he corrected. "It's natural to be a bit on edge afterward." Olivia wanted to argue further, to make him understand that this wasn't just post-traumatic anxiety, but she couldn't find the words to express what she was feeling without sounding, well, crazy. Instead, she nodded and allowed him to pull her into a comforting embrace. "How about this?" Daniel suggested. "We'll keep a close eye on things for the next few days. If anything else strange happens, we'll call Doctor. Reyes and ask her about the bear. Maybe there's something about these comfort bears we don't understand. Some feature they didn't explain to us." This seemed like a reasonable compromise, so Olivia agreed. But she couldn't quite shake the feeling that something extraordinary was happening right under their noses, something connected to that moment of inexplicable bonding between Lily and the bear cub on their balcony. The next morning, Daniel left for work early, and Olivia decided to take Lily and her inseparable comfort bear to the neighborhood park. The fresh air would do them all good, she reasoned, and perhaps being outside would help clear her own mind of these unsettling thoughts. The park was unusually empty for such a pleasant morning, just a few nannies with their charges and an elderly man walking a small dog. Olivia found a quiet spot under a large oak tree and spread out a blanket. She set Lily down with the comfort bear and a few toys, then sat beside them, enjoying the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves above. Lily was in particularly good spirits, giggling and babbling to her comfort bear as if carrying on an animated conversation. Olivia watched them with a mixture of affection and lingering unease. There was something about the way Lily interacted with the bear that was different from how she played with her other toys, more like how she behaved with actual people, making eye contact, pausing as if listening to responses, reacting with appropriate emotions. Olivia was so lost in these observations that she almost missed it when the small dog broke free from its elderly owner and came bounding toward them, barking excitedly. By the time she registered the approaching animal, it was already nearly upon them. What happened next occurred so quickly that later, Olivia would wonder if she had imagined it. As the dog lunged toward Lily, the comfort bear, which had been sitting inertly beside the baby, suddenly shifted. It was a subtle movement, just a slight repositioning, but it placed the stuffed toy directly between Lily and the oncoming dog. The dog skidded to a halt, its barks transforming into a startled yelp. It backed away, tail tucked between its legs, whimpering as if it had encountered not a stuffed toy but a real predator. The elderly owner hurried over, apologizing profusely as he collected his suddenly cowed pet. "I'm so sorry," he kept saying. "Barney is usually so friendly with children. I don't know what got into him." Olivia assured him it was fine, that no harm had been done, but her heart was pounding in her chest. She was certain, absolutely certain, that the comfort bear had moved on its own, had positioned itself to protect Lily. As soon as the man and his dog had moved away, Olivia reached for her phone to call Daniel. This was beyond odd coincidences or overactive imagination. Something truly inexplicable was happening, and she needed him to believe her. But before she could dial, her phone rang in her hand. The screen showed an unfamiliar number with a local area code. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. "Mrs. Mason, this is Officer Jenkins from Wildlife Rescue." The voice was tense, urgent. "I'm sorry to bother you, but something's happened that I think you should know about." Olivia's grip tightened on the phone. "What is it?" "The bear cub and its mother, the ones from the other day. They've been spotted again, but not where we relocated them. They're back in the city, Mrs. Mason. In fact, they've been seen in the vicinity of your building." A cold weight settled in Olivia's stomach. That's impossible. You took them miles away, to a protected forest area." "I know," Jenkins replied, sounding equally bewildered. "In 20 years, I've never seen anything like it. Bears don't behave this way. They don't return to urban areas after being relocated, especially not specific buildings. It's as if they're looking for something, or someone." Olivia's gaze drifted to Lily, who was now hugging the comfort bear tightly, rocking it as if consoling it. The bear's glass eyes caught the sunlight, and for just a moment Olivia could have sworn they flashed with an intelligence that no stuffed toy should possess. "Or maybe," she said slowly, an impossible idea taking shape in her mind,